Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our COVID conversation number 8. This is Dede Montgomery, and on behalf of the Oregon Institute of Occupational Health Sciences and the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center, with support from our local chapters of ASSP and the Oregon State Association of Occupational Health Nurses, I welcome you to this COVID conversation. Our title today is Public-Facing Workplaces, What About Restaurants? In just 1 minute or less, I'm going to introduce our host, my colleague, Nichole Guilfoy, who will introduce our guest today. But before I do that, I just want to alert you to our final 2 events that will be coming up in June on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday. On June 8th, we have COVID conversation number 9, Always an Afterthought, with Nargis Shadbeh of the Director of Farm Worker Programs and at the Oregon Law Center, along with Stephen Hecker, who many of you know, safety and health researcher educated. And that you can access registering for that on the link that we've put in the chat. And then our final event will be on June 22nd, COVID conversation number 10, What About High Tech, with Georgia Latham, who is with, she's an occupational health resource manager with ON Semiconductor, and that'll be hosted by Kate. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nichole Guilfoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Dede. And thank you so much, Lisa, for being with us today. Lisa is in charge of human resources for McMenamins. If you're in Oregon, you probably have been to a McMenamins. It is one of our treasures here. And Lisa's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the complications that we're experiencing in the restaurant industry and is going to discuss with us a few of the solutions that McMenamins has developed. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to help.
This is great. Well, you know, it must be something else, particularly to be in human resources and being in a constant state of flux or adjustment to rules changes and other kind of restrictions that we've experienced in the last year with the pandemic. Most recently, we're finding as things are beginning to open up, we're finding that there is a lot of different approaches to mask mandates. And with the CDC recently lifting many of the mandates and the state of Oregon shifting some of the responsibility to business owners to enforce mask mandates, we recognize that with such a high traffic industry as what McMenamins experiences, that must require a lot of interactions. How have you approached those restrictions, specifically the mask mandates?
Well, we just follow governor's orders and implement them as they are. We wait for governor's orders to come out. And then if we try, I mean, if we are doing something different than governor's orders, we have found, generally speaking, it's more difficult. I mean, following the governor's orders as they are difficult. It puts, I mean, from the beginning of the pandemic, it's put our frontline workers right there dealing with customers who are maybe not so nice, confronting our workers and being uncooperative. So, I mean, that's just gonna continue. So they've been managing this all along. And I mean, so now we are just in the first week of transitioning to, for our employee workforce and for customers, if you show proof of vaccination, you can be maskless. So we have just this week in Oregon and Washington implementing this. So if you go into a McMenamins and you see a server without a mask, it means they provided proof that they are fully vaccinated. And so we decided to go with it, and that those that are not fully vaccinated or choose to not get vaccinated, they will continue to wear masks and do social distancing. So like I said, whatever the governor's orders have been about masks throughout this whole thing, we just follow what that says and go with it.
That's great. And for audience members who may be outside of the state of Oregon, Oregon's approach has been to sort of take things county by county. So it wouldn't be uncommon to have one county in a, stricter state of restrictions while its neighboring county might have less restrictions. That must be interesting and tricky for McMenamins, which does have establishments not only across Oregon, but also in our neighboring state of Washington. What is
Yeah.
approach to avoid escalation when someone refuses to comply?
That's a great question. I mean, we when we started to have to deal with this, we just kind of thought back to, COVID kind of blew our brains out just as far as information overload to begin with. But so we kind of had to go back to, well, what do we do with difficult customers before? We would, that's just the same set of skills and the same kind of de-escalation, politely ask somebody to wear their mask. And when they become increasingly uncooperative, there is a certain point where managers and employees are empowered to refuse service. So whether the issue is masks or not, that's just how we've always approached, customers who are escalating into aggressive and inappropriate behaviors directed at our staff. So we just kind of tried to get everybody to just remember let's just apply it here now to this weird and unusual situation.
Well, these competencies in many cases are one of the secrets to your success, I'd say. Being able to discreetly and expertly handle those complicated social dynamics. Are you experiencing staffing shortages like so many other establishments in Oregon?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. There was in the beginning when we opened up for just to-go service back in the summer, we had trouble calling people back to work. Because I think primarily a very large fear factor. Everybody was afraid. People didn't have all the information. And so there was a big fear reaction. And so that took a lot of time to talk to people, coax people back to work and talk to them about returning to work. And, we tried to strike a real balance between understanding that somebody was terribly afraid or had a high risk factor, of course, that's a different category, and returning to work. And so as we've returned all our active employees that were in layoff status to return to work, we did that first. Then we started to have to hire. And in general, a lot less applicants are applying.
Interesting. It is unique in the restaurant compared to other public facing groups in that in a restaurant, people truly take off their mask so that they can enjoy your product. And, we didn't have that before. And so I would say that sort of the reluctance to jump back into that kind of environment with so many unknowns is absolutely legitimate. And it's nice to know that you're supporting and empowering your employees. What shift scheduling and tipping strategies are you using to minimize those staffing issues? Have you had to make any changes in how you're scheduling shifts or how you're approaching tips?
Well, I think the message to managers was just be as flexible as possible as you can with people. And I think they've tried, when they can help somebody out with, unique scheduling needs. I'm sure that they're, try to work with somebody really hard on how to make that work. So maybe before it'd be like, we need full-time flexible schedule and, this is what we need, right? And certainly I know managers worked with people before, but now I think they're trying to be even more flexible because, maybe they have a great employee who is having scheduling restrictions, I don't know, due to childcare because of the pandemic or whatever is going on for them. And, they want to hang on to that really good person and get through this. And maybe they're going to try to be more flexible.
That's really helpful. I don't know of another industry where scheduling can be so complicated and it really is a skill for those managers, because not only do you have such a transient work population, you have a lot of part-time employees with other scheduling considerations, such as school, or, as you said, childcare, or a variety of a second job. And so being able to absolutely have a competent management staff to be able to do that is so important. And I really congratulate you on that. That's not easy to do.
Well, it's a big congratulations to our head managers, because they're the head managers, and the assistant managers are the ones that work on the schedules. And I sometimes I look at a big schedule and I'm like, how do you even figure that out? Because then, you know, people have lives and they make last minute requests, as it has always been. It just makes it more, the desire to accommodate would be there, but the ability to have enough staff to help cover things is less apparent. You know, it's just like less people
Absolutely.
to help cover shifts. So,
well, and that does kind of bring some questions. You know, if you have fewer people to cover shifts, you have fewer people to kind of keep an eye on things.
yep.
And you know, this is sort of related to our first question around escalation and de-escalation. How are your staff experiencing increased security and safety issues brought on by the events of the past year? Whether it's a restaurant that's, you know, close in the city where there's been a lot of activity, or whether it's something farther out that I think we talked about some of your locations outside of the Portland area where the dynamic is a lot different.
Yeah. Well, we are, you know, we have 56 locations in Oregon and Washington, and each area is like a hiring microclimate. So the hiring dynamic and applicant and recruitment dynamic we have on the Oregon coast is very, very different than what we would have for Portland metro area. So it just comes down to you know, the manager to individually kind of be attuned to their location and what they need as far as employees and scheduling, and talking to their employees about what they need, because those managers are on the front line talking to their staff day in day out. I would say that I have observed over the last year an uptick in anxiety issues and people having to miss work because they're so anxious, like calling sick due to anxiety. I've certainly seen an uptick in that. So that's definitely had an impact for sure.
Wonderful that you're being flexible with folks. And it again, I want to go back to the scheduling piece, because it is an algorithm like I've never seen before. I mean, it is not easy. And to be able to accommodate the well-being of your employees and really put that first speaks volumes, and probably points a bit to your success as well. Are there things that you've instituted or learned during the pandemic that you think are beneficial to continue?
Oh, well, keep in mind, we have operations staff and we have a group of administrative staff. So those are two different employees. I think I can't even begin to look back and summarize the lessons regarding operations. I think that we've learned that it kind of teaches you how to, it makes you evaluate all aspects of the operation and how to emerge and make it more efficient and better, you know, and maybe, and I don't know what those specifics are for operations quite yet. I do know for administrative staff, you know, like many administrative workplaces, we're contemplating, you know, maybe having staff work from home a day a week, where, you know, we were like in the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, kind of an office place. And so I think maybe that might shift a little bit for us. We'll see what happens. I mean, I think that one thing that was proven is that the administrative workforce, we were all able to work from home and get the job done. And quite frankly, I think everybody did an extraordinary job under the circumstances. So I don't know. I think that's something that, you know, for me on my mind right now is in the forefront, is looking how we can, you know, and I think just be more flexible with people, you know.
That's wonderful to hear. Do do you have any advice or any words of wisdom that you would share with your colleagues in the industry about, what to look for and in terms of providing support for employees? You've mentioned flexible scheduling. Is there anything else that you would recommend? We know that for employees in, work that it tends to be sort of transient, like what we see in the restaurant industry, that sometimes we're finding some associated challenges to their own mental health. Sometimes due to that. What would you recommend to your colleagues outside of McMenamins?
Well, in thinking about things that was like, they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? So one of the things we learned very quickly during the pandemic, now keep in mind, most of our employees are not on a computer. So it's multi-site communication with 3,000 people who are not checking like a work email can be very challenging. And so right in the beginning of the pandemic, my answer centers around try your best to improve communication modes. So we didn't have an e-blast that went out to all our current employees from the company. Like we didn't have that. And so we made a concerted effort to be consistent about collecting people's personal email addresses so we could send out updates. When we were closed, as we go through the phases of reopening, I was like, oh, well, this is something that we're going to keep doing. We had to put it all together really quickly because of the pandemic, and we just didn't, have the event or the energy to kind of do this now because it was a lot of work. And I think now, I think we're trying to be better about pushing out company communication directly to our employees who are not online. I mean, all administrative staff are online. That's easy. But when you have all these, bussers and dishwashers and housekeepers and hosts and servers all over Oregon and Washington, and you want to get a consistent, like, hey, how are you doing message? Like we've pumped out a lot of messages, like reminding them that we have the employee assistance program to take care of themselves. They have free access to counseling. We provide free counseling to staff, a certain amount of visits. So we're concerned that we wanted to make sure everybody remembered that they had support and all the benefits that were available to them through the company. Even if they were in temporary layoff mode, they still had access to that information. So anyway,
that's great. I commend you. It is absolutely wonderful to know that you're able to provide these wonderful benefits to your employees, and even better that you're communicating the value of those benefits and encouraging people to use them. That's very special. And sometimes that can be quite a challenge even in a traditional office environment. So to be able to do that with essentially field staff is remarkable. And I really congratulate you on that success. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it was successful. There was a comment, like people could respond with comments, with questions, like anonymously, or they could do it just with their name anonymously or reveal their identity. And then we would get like little feedback emails, people complaining about things or saying, thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad I have this message. And thank you for the information. So it started a process that I think would behoove us to continue on. So.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. I have a question here from Edgard. Did you have to apply for PPP funds to cover some of the workers who were furloughed?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. Absolutely. We sure did.
That's great. Thank you. Dede reminds us that we know through our work and our research about the power of the supervisor and how important effective supervisor training is. Do you have tips for other hospitality providers on this?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's so many aspects to it. And I mean, and this is something I do a 2-day HR training with new head managers that I haven't been able to do in person for a year. So, that just covers just the tip of the iceberg for all the human resources stuff. And then in the field day-to-day training really comes from their general manager. So it's like, we have a regional manager that oversees the manager, and they engage with the training of that new supervisor, and the head manager engages with the training of their assistant managers, their hourly assistant managers. So our training is just like, we're not like fancy and electronic. It's all about talking with people and meeting with them in person and showing them, and with varying degrees of success depending on what's going on. I mean, that hasn't been easy to do in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So I would say that supervising training touch point is something we're really going to have to rebuild and shore up as we move forward, for sure, because COVID just made everything harder to do. So.
Well, Lisa, you have a community of folks here to support you, and certainly our institute and the Oregon Healthy Workforce Center are available to help you talk through some of those issues if we can be of any service to you. We thank you so much. I think that's it for our questions today. It's very special to be able to talk with you. It is not easy to find a restaurant expert with any time on their schedule right now. So thank you so much. I know you're just as busy as we all are. Dede,
Can I ask a question since we've got a couple minutes, and anybody else can jump in with a final question? I'm not seeing any. And you may have spoken a little bit about this at the beginning, but one of the things that is clear to me as I hear you speak, which I really appreciate, is, as a larger organization with more resources, although it probably doesn't feel like that sometimes. But I think sometimes an innovative structure, I think you have learned a lot, and you have a lot to offer probably smaller restaurants and hospitality industry groups. And I know you're active with ORA, or I guess it's Oregon Lodging and Restaurants. Do you have just any final, I kind of love having your time here, and I just want to see if there's any kind of final thoughts you have on that. We have folks on the line that probably provide support to smaller restaurants or smaller, maybe really, I know you feel you're struggling, but that they're also struggling. So do you have any final tips while we have you on here?
Well, I'm involved in the HR aspect, and I am not involved in like the financial wheelhouse of the business. But for all of us together, I've worked for McMenamins for, oh goodness, this week will be my 32nd anniversary with the company. I've worked for the McMenamins for 32 years. And I've seen the company grow from 200 employees to all the growth that we went through in the 90s and in the 2000s and beyond. And I think that communication is the key. And what I found was everybody is any ways that you can find to connect with one another and have those breakthrough communication conversations. They're going to be key. And I'm not saying that we're like perfect. We're clearly not perfect from this. But when I find that there's a trouble spot, then I kind of dig a little bit deeper. I'm like, well, why is everybody emailing about it? Why don't we get a phone call together and talk? Like, using words and talking. I know this sounds really basic, and probably everybody's rolling their eyes, but for a big company like mine, we get in the mode of having to get tasks done because there's so much to do, and slowing down, having those meaningful conversations with people, finding out what's going on. We've certainly lost a couple, some good employees because we didn't slow down and talk with them, and we found out afterwards how they were feeling. And so there's nothing that can replace, all this. I'm pitched all kinds of fancy technology options all the time for everything. And maybe I'm a little bit old fashioned, but nothing replaces taking the time and making the time to have those good one-on-one conversations with people to problem solve these immense challenges in front of us. And even just talking with everybody here today made me feel better just to talk about things, because it's so profoundly stressful and so unique. And it's just good to make those connections with people and talk it out.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really glad I asked that question because no, we were not rolling our eyes. We were nodding our heads in agreement because we're all experiencing that. And I think it does come back to some of the things we really talk about within total worker health, right? Is that really kind of caring, showing that you care, showing that you respect each other and all of that. So thank you so much. And I don't see any more questions. I'm going to turn it back to Nichole, who can thank everyone, and then we'll go ahead and stop the recording after that.
Well, this has been another wonderful COVID conversation. Lisa, you have really enlightened us, and it is exciting to hear about the innovations that you've created to support your staff and support your business during this time. These are, our little community here. We're all very close, and I know that we're all very appreciative, not only to you, Lisa, but also Dede for putting all of this together along with Kate Wood. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.